Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fight for Our Lives, Defending Democracy in a Post-January 6th World. I'm your host, Francesca Fiorentini. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a journalist. I'm a podcast host. I'm a bunch of things. And I am a massive fan of the speakers we are to hear from tonight. And I am also an American who's incredibly concerned about the future of our democracy, especially in the wake of January 6th, 2021. Tonight, we're going to hear in the form of panels and roundtable discussions. We're going to hear from representatives. We're going to hear from movement and community leaders and analysts about what we can do to prevent something like January 6th from actually happening and potentially succeeding. I myself have been in this struggle for a minute now, ever since I believe W legitimately stole an election back in the year 2000. So on and on it goes. We're going to talk about how to fight far-right extremism, the ongoing threats to our democratic process, what's been going on in terms of gerrymandering, in terms of voting rights, which are the communities who've been most impacted by this kind of extremism. And we're mostly going to talk about how close we really did come to an American coup led by an American president, a lame duck American president. We all know that the National Guard was not called that day, in part because there was fear that it would be used against American people and the Capitol police officers and in the favor of those insurrectionists on January 6th. It seems like we haven't had enough of a reckoning, and it seems like we haven't had, especially as movements, a real conversation about what kind of pressure, what is our work that we have to do here on the outside of the halls of power, as we move forward with this inside-outside strategy. We also know that a lot of the people there on January 6th, whether they were elected officials doing this the legislative way, or whether they were in the streets, ally themselves with white nationalist causes. They are militant causes, and that even some of the people involved hail from ranks of the military and former police. So that is also something I think we should all be concerned about. But mostly we're here because we know the threat is not over. Donald Trump is running for president again, somehow, might be running from jail, literally from jail. And who knows if he loses yet again, what that could mean. It will kick off an entire circus of election denialism, and who's to say what will be left of our democracy after all of that. So, hey, it is not all doom and gloom. We're here to actually come away with concrete solutions, and we've got action items for everybody. And in a little bit, we'll talk about what we are asking people who are watching to do and what you can do to get involved right now. Again, we're going to get these kinds of insights. I'm just going to preview it. We've got Representative Ted Lieu. We've got Representative Ilhan Omar. We have Erika Andiola, who's been working on immigrant rights for decades. We have Maurice Mitchell of Working Families Party. We have so many leaders from these movements. And we're going to close it out looking at all the hopeful moments, especially coming out of labor right now. And the great Senator Nina Turner is going to be joining us for that discussion. So you don't want to miss any part of this, but I want to kick it off because there's a reason that we're doing this. There's a theme. There is something we're drawing some inspiration from when it comes to this event, and that is a comic book. That's right. It is a comic book that was created, that imagined what if January 6th had been successful? As we all know, we came pretty damn close. All right. Just if Donald Trump had been a little bit stronger, could strong arm that Secret Service agent, maybe things would have gone down differently. Maybe not. But because of that, I want to bring in the two sort of brainchildren of this entire event, law professor Alan. Oh my gosh, Alan Jenkins. I was going to say Jenkins, and then Alan Jenkins. And Gongolan, author, activist, New York Times bestselling author and activist. Guys, let's start with this comic, where it all began. How did you guys link up, and why did you decide it was important to create this comic and tell this story, and especially in this way?
Oh, thank you so much for having us here. And well, why a comic book? There have been so many articles and books written about January 6th, and of course, the televised congressional hearings. But we chose to make a comic book because we wanted to ask one very important question, which is, what would have happened had the insurrection succeeded? And let's be clear, the plan was a violent attempt to try and overthrow our democracy, install an unelected president, and empower violent extremists across the country. And if they were to follow through on their threats, hang Mike Pence and do harm to many of our elected representatives. And on January 6th, history really hung in the balance. And we came very close to living in a different reality. And so the reason I think that question that the comic book is asking is so important is because the insurrection on January 6th never actually ended. The same threats exist today, and they're perhaps more organized and more energized. And if given a chance, they will try it again. So this book is a cautionary tale that paints a picture of what could have happened, but it's really for us in the here and now, and showing us the kind of future that we have to work very hard to try and avoid. And across all the issues that people are fighting for, racial, economic, gender justice, climate justice, it will be much harder, if not impossible, if we don't have the tools of democracy in our hands. And so these crises are deeply linked to the crisis in our democracy. And this next election is really not just about who's going to win or which party. This is about whether we will have any democracy left at all. But I will say the comic book, it has 4 issues. It's meant to be a great story, action-packed, great adventures, characters. And we promise it's also a story of resistance and hope, and will give us some clear ideas about what we can do to fight authoritarianism and build the more just democracy that we deserve. And I'll say that issue number 1 is out now. Issue number 2 is coming out in a couple of weeks. You can get it on beyond16.com or online at online booksellers. And we've already given out thousands of copies to schools, libraries, nonprofits, to elected officials who are defending democracy, and to many election deniers, whether they liked it or not, have received them as well. And we're just grateful that the comic book has provoked a conversation like this to shine a light on the real life threats facing our democracy, and also to talk about what all of us can do who care about our children's future, what we can do collectively to protect democracy at this crucial time.
Thank you. Yeah, and Alan, please weigh in, because, I think the biggest thing is, we know what went down thanks to the January 6th committee largely taking us step by step, and now we have an illustrated version of it in the form of this book. But I also want to talk about accountability, right? It's almost like we're missing the second half of a January 6th committee that can tell us what is being done to make sure this never happens again. So jump in there and tell me about this comic and what you hope people take away from it.
Yeah, thanks, Francesca. So look, I love comics and I love democracy. Our democracy is in deep, deep trouble. And I believe in the power of popular culture to reach new audiences, to create and spark new activism. And that's what this comic book and lots of other efforts are doing. They're reaching that 1/6, the graphic novel has already reached thousands and thousands of everyday folks, including some of the people watching this live stream. Shout out to our Kickstarter supporters. Everyday people who maybe don't have the time or the luxury to read the 800-page House Select Committee report on January 6th insurrection. Great report, but not everybody has the time to read that. People who maybe haven't been able to do that or be glued to cable news, but who love our democracy and equal justice and are looking for ways to protect it, who understand that it's at risk. And so in order to connect those people and everyone watching now with concrete action, we've partnered with Western State Center, an amazing organization where Gon and I are senior fellows and a major sponsor of this live stream, to create an education and action guide, which is also available at beyond16.com. So folks can take the story, be inspired by it, but then actually go out into communities and the streets and schools and combat bigotry and promote democracy. That's very, very important to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gon. We're going to talk to you a little bit later when we get into climate justice and the pivotal role that plays in protecting our democracy. But Alan, stay on, because there is an action. We promised an action item. This isn't just a panel. This isn't just sit back and listen to these amazing speakers, if I do say so myself, but we're asking something from every single one of you. But first, just to sort of better couch where we are when it comes to the state of our democracy, I did want to welcome Deputy Legal Director of the ACLU, Yasmin Cader. Yasmin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Francesca.
Yeah, and Yasmin, it's really interesting because, when Donald Trump was elected, right, we saw organizations like the ACLU get an influx of support, whether it's donations or, protests, whatnot. I mean, I myself look to the ACLU all the time, right? Now we're on the other side. We have a different president. We have President Biden. And there is this sense that the imminent danger to our democracy is largely gone. What are you seeing, and what is concerning to you about maybe that backseat attitude versus the reality?
Well, we all need to get into that front seat, Francesca, because in many ways our democracy is at greater risk than it has been at any time since the Civil War. We're facing many threats, including assaults on the fundamental pillars of democracy. So I want to talk about three. Let's start with assault on the right to vote. A strong democracy here requires that all Americans be eligible to vote, and that voting be free and easy, and that all people count equally. But since 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, the floodgates have really opened to brutal voter suppression schemes that are designed to make it more difficult for people to vote and more difficult to have their votes count. So just this year alone, there were 382 bills in 47 states that were aimed at restricting access to the ballot or interfering with the election administration process. And there's also just a continuation of illegal partisan and racial gerrymandering going on. So the question, how do we fight back? Well, at the ACLU, we are fighting for equal and fair representation so that there's fair maps that are free of gerrymandering, so that voters can elect lawmakers who will actually represent them. And we in the ACLU are fighting in both state and federal courts, including in the Supreme Court, to combat that illegal gerrymandering and those unfair maps. We're also working to end voter suppression, challenging laws across the country that are designed to suppress the vote, even laws that prohibit giving water to people who are standing in line to vote. Mm-hmm. We're fighting felon disenfranchisement, working for access to the vote for millions of citizens who have served their sentences, moved on with their lives, and really want to fulfill their civic duty, but are being barred from doing so by unfair state laws. And then finally, modernizing voting systems, advocating for same-day registration, which is one of the most impactful tools to increase voter participation. So that's one threat. The second one I want to talk about, though, is attacks on our First Amendment rights, our rights to knowledge, to truth, and to the freedom to learn. Mm-hmm. Since 2021, dozens of states have moved to introduce and pass classroom censorship bills. Those restrict students and teachers from talking about race and gender and sexual orientation in public school. Right. And More than just that, Francesca, we have the proliferation of book bans, banning books that are predominantly written by Black and LGBTQ authors. And these threats, these are the markers of authoritarianism and truly antithetical to democracy. Mm-hmm. But really, it's so important to remember that, we are linking arms with other civil rights organizations to stand up to these threats. We're challenging these book bans. We're challenging these classroom censorship laws, including Florida's Stop Woke Act, which tried to stop teaching about systemic racism and sex discrimination. We filed a lawsuit that resulted in an injunction against that act. So we're here for it. But the last thing I want to talk about is one of the greatest threats is the threat to democracy that comes from decades of abandonment. Our country has abandoned so many of our people and so many of our communities. We have a plague of food deserts. We have underfunded and crowded schools, places where there's little or no public transportation, rampant unemployment and underemployment. And instead of investing in our people and in their potential, we have relied on police and prisons to try to address poverty and crime. Instead of tackling racism and structural inequality, we are further entrenching segregation and separation through redlining and highways that are built to divide. Right. And instead of caring for our most vulnerable, we're passing them on the streets without even registering their humanity.
100%. Thank you, Yasmin. Thanks for breaking that down. I think that's really, really clear. And especially, look, I hope that 1/6 becomes the banned comic book that kids are like passing around and like showing each other, and making sure they read the latest hotness.
That's right.
Yasmin, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for breaking that down. It's something that grounds the rest of this conversation. And Alan, what are we doing about all this? Tell me that, like, what you're asking all of our viewers to do, because there's actually something that was built into the Constitution that allows us to take action in the wake of something like January 6th.
That's right. This is something that everyone who's watching this live stream right now can do right now. The Constitution is clear. If you took a prior oath of office and then you engaged in insurrection or gave aid and comfort to those who did, then you are barred from future office. It's Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to our Constitution, which was ratified after the Civil War, speaks, precisely to that principle, but it's got to be enforced. So viewers can go right now to beyond16.com and sign up on a petition. This is a petition to state and local election officials and also to federal officials to bar, disqualify, or remove from office anyone who participated in the January 6th insurrection. And let me be clear, when we say the insurrection, we mean the fake electors scheme, the attempt to intimidate state and local election officials and the vice president, as well as the attack on the Capitol. A lot of the rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th have actually been held accountable in a court of law, but very, very few of the politicians who schemed behind the scenes to destroy our democracy have been held accountable in any way. So we want folks to sign that petition. It's powered by Move On. Thank you to everyone who's signed so far. If you've already signed, send it to friends and allies so that they can sign. If you haven't signed, please go to beyond16.com and sign that petition now so we can prevent another January 6th.
And we'll be sending reminders to sign that. But let's move on. Thank you so much, Alan, for all that. Let's move on. We are going to hear from Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who has been on the forefront of voting rights, not only obviously as Attorney General, but previously as a congressman. But first, 2016, Keith Ellison had some pretty prescient words for us. Let's take a look.
Say is that anybody from the Democratic side of the fence who thinks that who's terrified of the possibility of President Trump better vote, better get active, better get involved, because this man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
Next week, George, we had Jesse Ventura in Minnesota win the governorship. Nobody thought he was going to win. I'm telling you, stranger things have happened.
I would be sending people that, Attorney General, I would be sending people that every single week if that were me. But there you were in 2016 or 2015, actually, predicting the eventual nomination and victory of Donald Trump. And yeah, strange things have happened. And here we are on the other side of a attempted coup. How do you see it now as Attorney General, and given that this presidency and has really paved the way for any kind of election denialism to just bang on all of the legal levers, with whichever attorney will represent them possible, and it's like the Band-Aid is off, right? I mean, the gloves are off. Anyone can come up in the wake of Donald Trump with a more effective strategy and potentially win.
Well, Francesca, thanks for having me, and I wish I was wrong. I really do. That's one where I am not that happy that I was right about that. Summer 2015. Right. But I'll tell you this, though. I don't think anybody's laughing in now, right? You saw the reaction of some of the folks on the panel. I think that we have a much more realistic view of what's in front of us. What I think is important is not to be too pessimistic. And so let me just say, in 1964, we passed the Civil Rights Act for the first time in a century. And that not only brought Black people and people of color equal rights and fair accommodations, also for women. Mm-hmm. Sex is in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. 65, we passed the Voting Rights Act. 68, we passed the Fair Housing Act. And then 72, Roe versus Wade. Now, all those things have been under attack ever since we passed them. Right. Of course they have. One reason that I had a sense, and I didn't know it, but I had a sense that Trump could win is because if you manipulate race in America, that is a potent argument. And he was the most overtly racist since George Wallace to run for the presidency, mm-hmm. or maybe even Pat Buchanan. And these folks, that's a potent message. Well, you know what also is a potent message? Human solidarity. Human solidarity is a potent message. Yes. And while they are running around fighting against multiracial democracy, which our country has enjoyed since 1968, they're now just trying to squeeze that progress back into a bottle. If we come to understand that, yes, maybe Black people, gay people, women, people who new Americans, maybe we all don't see each other together, but the people who hate us, they see us as all one enemy to fight. Mm-hmm. And so we better get clear that solidarity is what we've got to have. We've got to come together. If you want a friend, the best thing to do is to be one. And so stand in solidarity with people. And let me just add, we have got to have, the folks who are on the call are going to lay out how tough our situation is. It wasn't tougher than MLK in 1954. Right. And so let's take heart and understand that pessimism is also the wrong reaction. Mm-hmm. If we come together, we can have a brighter future than we have ever had. Look at the labor movement right now. Doesn't that inspire you?
Absolutely.
These folks are pushing out and getting busy. And so that's inspiring. And I'll also say we need the artists. I'm so glad you feature these graphic artists because art will inspire like no politician ever could.
Absolutely.
Art, sing, write a poem, make a movie. This art is going to inspire in a brand new way. So I'll also say we need people to sign up for being vote counters, and we need people to sign up to be election judges. Yeah. And we need to sue, and we need to maximize voter turnout. In Minnesota, we have the highest voter turnout in the country, 80% during the presidential. Everybody else has to match it, and Minnesota has to go higher. Can we get to 85 nationally among Dems? Yeah. So I'll be quiet because my dear friend Ted Lieu, I see him. I miss you a lot, my brother. How you doing? You're looking good.
I miss you, Attorney Ellison.
You're looking better every day, man. Anyway, you're looking ready for the fight. So I'll hand it back to you, Francesca. But I'm so honored to be part of the conversation. And this is the best time to be alive as an American person. This is the time to restore and reestablish liberty and justice for all. And you get to be there. So God bless.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. That's what we need. That's the kind of attitude we need. And Congressman Ted Lieu, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us. You were actually in the Capitol on January 6th, front row seats to probably one of the darkest days in American history. And I wanted to, I know the Attorney General just left us on a very high note and a happy note, but I did want to ask you, you work with Republicans day in and day out. You work with Republicans who were aiding and abetting and offering comfort to those same, rioters and insurrectionists. And I think we keep on talking about democracy, democracy, democracy. I don't know if every American is convinced that Republicans currently believe in democracy because they spend half their time trying to prevent people from even accessing the ballot, right? Gerrymandering, whatnot. And they relish in things like minority rule. How do you see it as a representative? How do you see it in terms of your colleagues over on the other side of the aisle?
Well, thank you for your question. Let me first thank Jay for inviting me, and thank you, Francesca, for moderating. And it's a thrill to be here with so many great speakers, such as Attorney General Keith Ellison. In answer to your question, I'm going to give you some views of my dealings with Republicans. I think you can split them into sort of three groups here in Congress. You've got a group of true believers, folks that actually, in fact, believe that Donald Trump won the election, and all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories. I put people like Marjorie Taylor Greene into that group. Then you've got a second group that are very, very conservative people who really don't believe that, but they don't really care because all their conservative policies are being executed with a Republican majority in the House. And then third, you've got a group of people that know this is all crazy, but they're too fearful to really stand up. We had some Republicans stand up, such as Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. You'll note, though, they are no longer in the House of Representatives. So what Republicans have learned is if you stand up to Donald Trump or some of these the right-wing base, you basically lose your job. And that's very, very troubling. Right. Now, some words of hope. You did mention gerrymandering. Basically, Democrats have won this year all the major cases on gerrymandering. So in Alabama, there is a new congressional district that's being created that goes from a Trump district to now a Biden plus 12 district. We're going to pick up a seat in Alabama. You've got cases that have come down that are helping us in other states. And then the Supreme Court, in a surprise decision, upheld the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, absolutely. That is huge and really important. Final question. How close did it feel? You feel like this in terms of like, are we closer to restoring our democracy and getting to the point we want to be at? Or can we take this veer off the cliff here?
Last year, I was very, very concerned about losing our democracy, and the voters showed up last November. Democrats did better than any other party holding the White House for many decades, and pretty much all the overwhelming majority of election deniers who ran statewide for office lost.
Right.
So now I'm concerned about losing our democracy, and the best way to prevent that is to, and I know it sounds very basic, but basically make sure not only that you vote, but that your friends vote, and you get as many people who think like you to also vote. And I think we need to be careful about how we talk about voter suppression, because you don't want people to think that somehow they can't vote and they're not going to go vote. Yes, there are obstacles, but it's not like the Jim Crow laws. For most of these places and for most voters, if you're registered to vote, you can vote. You might have to overcome some obstacles, but you're going to be able to vote, and people will help you go vote if you need assistance. So we need to get that message out that people just absolutely need to go vote next year.
100%. I mean, at this point in time, it is a radical act. It's always been a radical act, but it continues to be one. Representative Ted Lieu of California, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your words of wisdom and insight, and thank you for carrying this struggle on the inside of the halls of power as we sort of shake them from the outside. Thank you. Be very well.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick little mini break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what are the communities that are fighting back in the midst of all the right-wing extremism. Don't go anywhere.
Obviously, the surgeries were happening again and again and again, and it took a whistleblower to actually blow the cover on what is going on. We don't know the full extent of what's going on, but just the silence and the way that women were obviously concerned and upset that was happening, and they were just not being listened to. That's what shocks me most. And also the callous disregard once again for women of color, and the disregard for allowing them to have reproductive autonomy. In one part of the government, we have teenage girls being denied access to abortions when they are pregnant without wanting to be pregnant. On the other side, now we have women who are getting hysterectomies when they say they did not want hysterectomies. The agency.
Welcome back to the fight of our lives, defending democracy in a post-1/6 world. I'm Francesca Fiorentini. There you just have a little bit of a snippet of, again, the atrocities that are happening on the U.S.-Mexico border, undocumented migrants being forced to denied abortion care or alternatively given forced hysterectomies. Anything goes, it seems, when you can dehumanize a population, as so many have done to the immigrant population here in this country. And that, in fact, is a part of a right-wing agenda, a part of an anti-democratic agenda. And here to sort of break down how we fight back is Erika Andiola, immigrant rights activist, formerly of Raíces, currently with the Youth Center. Erika, so good to see you.
So good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. I wanted to bring you into this conversation because, look, there are scapegoats to fascism, right? There are people that fascist authoritarianism has to turn into enemies, and that happens to be, of course, immigrant communities. What have you seen? Since, I guess, even since Trump left office, how are we best positioned to fight back against this kind of extremism? And are we doing it well enough?
That's a great question. I can tell you that, unfortunately, we're not in a good place right now. Unfortunately, the Trump administration, they did a pretty good job at dehumanizing immigrants, which is what they wanted to do, right? And obviously it's not what we want, but they really use this playbook that has been used by fascist governments and fascist leaders for many years all over the world, which is scapegoating immigrants, right? Pointing the finger at the other, at the unknown. If you just remember every single talking point that he used, it was always scapegoating immigrants for anything. It could have been, for people's, honestly, even if climate change, if he believed in it, he would probably point the finger at immigrants.
Oh, COVID was apparently brought by people coming across the border.
COVID was, yes.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't matter what happens in this country. Most of the time, it's going to be our fault, according to, people like Donald Trump and some of people in the Republican Party. And I think at this point, he shifted so much the narrative that we are, challenged with this being in this circumstance of the immigrant rights movement, that we, there's a lot of people who now believe that immigrants, are, sort of coming into this country and that are a threat to security and all these things that Trump would say. And so that's really not the case, right? The case is that there are a lot of challenges that we are seeing in other countries like Venezuela, really all over the world. We have so many challenges happening with people needing to leave, needing to migrate. And that's the case right now. We have a lot of people, mostly from Venezuela and South America, coming into the US. And instead of us building a better system, we have had years to be able to do that, a humane system. We have actually created systems of punishment, which is what we see now, most of our money going to just creating jails, detention centers, more, border patrol. And we saw what happened, right? We ended up putting kids in cages because we have so many resources to do that instead of opening our arms to figuring out how we can welcome folks into safety.
Absolutely. We could talk for so long about this. And just a quick plug, Erika has spoken about that on my podcast, The Bituation Room. And we go into a lot of the militarism and even the way the current administration needs to be picking up and doing a lot more. But that is what the outside pressure is for. We have to dilute this hate. And the only way to do that is with building something better. So thank you, Erika. I really appreciate your fight and your struggle. I mean, and your words, and you've always been on the forefront of this. So take very good care. I want to bring in Gabby Price, who is a trans rights activist and labor organizer as well. Gabby, thanks so much for being with us. Look, there's another piece to this. It's, the newest rage. Ever since Donald Trump left, the right has decided we're going to demonize trans people. We're going to add that to the long list of people we're going to blame for literally everything. Maybe talk about how anti-trans hate undergirds, again, that sort of fascist authoritarian tendency that we see taking root. I mean, I think a lot of people are questioning, what is this? Why now?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there is a growing horror in the country right now that threatens the lives of millions at a scale and severity that oftentimes, people think only kind of exists in the history books. Like things are getting very bad, honestly, for trans people right now. There is a systemic effort being coordinated by increasingly powerful radical bigots to fundamentally erase the existence of trans people in America. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about what's going on with trans issues right now. It's not, a simple kind of like political debate. There's an outright effort to erase our existence. Yeah, it's scary, it's terrifying, and something's got to change. And we have to address it.
Yeah, I mean, just to show you how ridiculous and in the forefront trans hate is for the Republican Party. Hey, let's go to a CPAC video, and I apologize to everyone in advance.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So so there you have, I don't know, some Newsmax plus rando dude giving his opinion on eradicating transgender people, really is what he's talking about. But Gabby, look, this is not just a debate that happens, like you just said. It is, we are talking about militias. We were talking about Proud Boys who show up at school boards. We were talking about them, working with radicalized moms for, liberty or whatever. This is just as much of a legislative and a legal threat to trans people as it is a physical one. So how do we offer a counter narrative? What do we do? How can we, especially as allies, stand in the forefront of this fight and not just, sort of let it pass us by?
Yeah, I think first, definitely, is as a foundation, making sure to have an understanding of what is happening right now. Because from banning our access to healthcare to spreading dehumanizing propaganda on a mass scale and outright gathering lists of trans individuals in different states, it's clear that transphobic hate has become a central platform point of the right wing. And in total this year, 45 states have proposed anti-trans legislation. And all of this is their warm-up still. Many trans people are living in fear for our lives right now. And so what we need is support from the people in our life. What we need is community mobilization. The simple fact is that our identity as trans people is a truth so fundamental to our humanity that we live it every day, despite the hardships, the violence, and the erasure that comes with it. And so it's not just a label. It's not some sort of political show or merely a way to dress, but a personhood as deep, authentic, and human as anyone else's. And so we need to work towards recognition of transness as a category of personhood deserving of societal and legal respect and recognition with full civil rights named explicitly in the law, which we currently don't have at the federal level. Trans people are a valid class of people. We need rights and protections accordingly. And in order to make that happen, we all have to play a role in the fight. So, you know, join a local organization if you aren't part of one yet. Talk to your family and friends to help educate them. Support the trans people in your life directly and connect with them. That's how we normalize trans existence and build the mass support we need for trans civil rights at the federal level. Building community and supporting one another. Because
absolutely. Thank you. And I also just want to say that I think that, you know, policing people's bodies and othering them is truly a piece of this kind of extremist fascist Christian nationalism, if you will, right? And you know, when they, especially on trans issues, you know, there's always this, oh well, it's just, you know, it's just kids. We're only worried for kids. And then you realize, no, it's trans affirming care and gender affirming care for all people, you know, and it on and on and on, right? Again, if anyone thinks that this is not leading to, you know, the kind of reactionary and sort of rollbacks like, you know, banning interracial marriage, that is definitely where we're headed, right? Like this is all part of the, again, as Keith Ellison laid out earlier, the backlash to the gains of the civil rights movement and the LGBTQ plus movement. But anyway, Gabby, thank you so much. Thank you for your work and thank you for laying that out. And I think it's really important that we all, you can do something so small and so meaningful just in your own community when it comes to trans liberation and trans rights. So thank you. Take care. All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna get into some heady stuff. All right, we're gonna do the analysis portion. We're going to root out right-wing extremism, and with me to help. Hang on, let me get all of my bearings about me. I apologize. I was just too wrapped up in our conversations here. I got to give you a proper intro, Tarso. So with me is Tarso Luis Ramos, who is a political research associate who's been challenging the far right for more than 25 years, launched major initiatives around anti-Semitism, misogyny, authoritarianism, and is an awesome writer as well. And then Wajahat Ali, who's a columnist for the Daily Beast, a public speaker, recovering attorney, still recovering, I guess, and is the author of Go Back to Where You Came From and other helpful recommendations on how to become an American. You guys, we haven't really in this whole conversation sort of like problematized right-wing extremism and violence. You know, I think we're trying to say that you restore democracy and keep it around. And I'm wondering if the right even believes in democracy to begin with, number one, and how we fight if they don't. It doesn't seem like democracy is part of the ideology of right-wing movements in this country, despite them swearing that they love the founding fathers up and down. But Tarso, I guess just maybe jump in here. You know, there's a lot of low-level thugs who were arrested and locked up from January 6th, but, you know, Stuart Rhodes, you can only tuck him away for so long.
No, that's right, Francesca. And, it's of course not just in the United States that this is happening. And so I think it's helpful for people in the United States to step back a little bit beyond the kind of MAGA and Trump phenomenon and recognize that the kind of gendered attacks, for instance, on trans people and women that you were just discussing with your previous guest are parts of the authoritarian playbook around the globe. And what we're experiencing is really the third global march of authoritarianism since the start of the 20th century. The first brought us the Nazis and Italian and Spanish fascism. The second march after World War II was typified by military coups and dictatorships, propped up in many cases by the US or the Soviet Union. That's what drove my family from Brazil to the United States. And now we're in a third global march. This is not anything natural. This is something that's been organized. So fueled by racial nationalism, mass theocratic movements, and extreme economic inequality, nationalists and even fascist politicians and parties are on the rise from Berlin to Brasilia, Poland to the Philippines, Warsaw to right here in Washington, D.C. And just a little bit of a sense of just how bad it's gotten, according to the Varieties of Democracy Institute at a think tank in Sweden, by 2022, 72% of the world's population, 5.7 billion people, are living under autocracies. That's up from 46% in 2012. So in 20 years, from less than half the world's population to nearly 3/4 of the world's population, right? Wiping out democracy gains of the previous 35 years. So the indicators are everything from freedom of the press to religious pluralism and all the things that your guests have been talking about. To your question, Francesca, as we know in the United States, the MAGA bloc has taken over the Republican Party and aligned its coalition partners around a strategy of dismantling popular democracy very explicitly in favor of minority rule. To be clear, white minority patriarchal rule, right? To be specific. And while the agendas of some of these different coalition partners, the Proud Boys, white nationalists, Christian nationalists, who are kind of the senior partner in this coalition, are all a little bit different, right? The end game for each is a little bit different. The good society or the kind of nightmare for the rest of us is a little bit different, but they all recognize that in order to impose their agenda, they have to do away with popular democracy, that they require minority rule, they require authoritarianism. And that's what's galvanized them into such a forceful coalition.
Yeah, it makes me at once scared, but also hopeful, knowing that people around the world are dealing with their own autocrats. So we have a lot in common, a lot to be in solidarity with. Wajahat, I wanted to ask you about, also, and we're seeing it play out this week, the forces of not just hate, but massive disinformation, right? And massive gaslighting and myths and rumors and just the ways that people get, Facebook radicalized. And it's interesting because, since January 6th, we had the House Special Committee. The FBI, I believe, is redirecting some resources to far-right extremism. But on that cultural front, on this, I think we saw, and let's just point out, the Biden administration sort of walk back efforts to, tackle misinformation from inside of government. That does not bode well, in my opinion, for how to really combat this. But I don't know, maybe you can weigh in on what we might be overlooking in terms of preventing another Jan 6th.
We have the numbers and we have the better story. But if the majority is committed to being flabby, lazy, and just a milquetoast moderate, then give me a radicalized, weaponized, zealous minority that wakes up every day and is organized and will cut through us like we were soft butter. No disrespect to butter. I have 2 minutes before I throw it to a fellow Muslim, Representative Omar. So you got two Muslims back to back. America. But we're in a situation where, first and foremost, we have to recognize that we're dealing with a radicalized and weaponized minority that is the enemy of democracy. You have to name it. And this is where, you and I, Francesca, are in the media. And Steve Bannon said, and I agree with him on this. Yes, just wait for me. Just wait a second. What I agree with him. He said that the war is going to be waged in the media, right? The enemy is the media. Forget the Democrats. And he knows, and right wing knows, that through disinformation and through conspiracy theories, you can win over enough people. The problem is that many of our institutions still engage at both sides false equivalence. The analogy I always give is the Peanuts cartoon, where Charlie Brown says to Lucy, "Hey, are you sure you're not going to lift up the football?" And she goes, "I won't lift up the football." And then the majority says, "Okay." And then what happens? She lifts up the football and we fall down on our butt. This is where You need a multicultural coalition of the willing to come together. What I call is the ethnic Avengers. And we're dealing with, if I may go with my superhero analogy, the Brotherhood of Moon's Hellfire Club, right? Because love has gone intersectional, but so has hate. Fascists are globalizing, right? They're mainstreaming this conspiracy theories. So what you need is the majority to realize what we're up against, number one. Number two, that we have the numbers. You have to work the refs. I'm giving you strategies. The right wing has always worked the refs to get favorable media coverage. And what we've seen in the past 2 months is when the mainstream majority, which is us, tell people on corporate media, hey, just because Joe Biden is 80, Donald Trump is 77 years old. I haven't seen him eat a salad in my life. He looks terrible. Oh, by the way, he also has 91 criminal counts. And oh, by the way, he led a violent insurrection. You're seeing the pressure, right? You're seeing the pressure. And when you're seeing grassroots movements, especially on the ground, go against the book bans, people like representing and organizing and coming up to go against the minority groups such as Moms for Liberty, you're seeing even in the quote unquote red states, Francesca, what's happening? We're winning. And so I want to really, because with limited time, I know that you got to go to Representative Omar. I want to remind folks that especially with the attacks on the LGBTQ, I've seen it as a divide and conquer technique, especially with many progressive communities, communities of color, and religious communities. I want to remind them that the same exact tactics that the right wing is using against LGBTQ, the same conspiracy theories, replace transgender with Muslim. It's exactly what happened in 2010 and 2012 with the anti-Sharia threat. It's the same exact DNA, Francesca, that they're using with the anti-CRT threat. And as such, we have to not be, like, if you will, tunnel visioned. Step outside yourself. You're not going to agree on everything, folks, but link up with those people who are at least willing to fight for democracy and believe that I might not agree with you on everything, but I agree that you and your family deserve to live with peace and security and freedom, and that your child one day, inshallah, God willing, can be a co-protagonist of the American narrative. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And Alan has told me to tell everyone that I am a senior fellow at the Western States Center. And with that, I will give it to my Muslim sister, Representative Ilhan Omar, because all Muslims are the same.
Yes, they are. Yes. Well, thank you, Representative Omar. Wajahat Ali and Tarso Luis Ramos. Thank you so much for putting that into a global context. And I 100% agree with you, Wajahat, about needing to get the reins and change the narrative, and also the coalition. It's about building coalition. But again, as has been alluded to, get these guys off here. Get them out of here. Get them out of here. Oh, there we go. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of the great state of Minnesota, how are you? Welcome.
I am good, Francesca. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Hi to Wajahat, and I see my great friend Mondale Robinson as well. Hello.
Oh yeah, Mondale's waiting in the wings. Spoiler, you just let everybody know. First of all, big fan, long time, first time, and look, Representative, you were there in the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and this is sort of grounding our conversation. I just want to say I feel like you are someone who represents the future of what our democracy could be. Truly a multi-racial, multi-ethnic, and multi-religiously free democracy. And so I want to ask you about how you foresee us and how we go about making sure that our democracy's best days are ahead of us, right? That we can keep building what really is an idea. As former President Barack Obama said, don't always agree with him on everything, but I love that it is an idea and we have to keep on making it a reality. So you can also take it in literally any direction you want, but thoughts?
No, that's a really good question, and glad to be with you all. This is a really incredible conversation. I just want to give a shout out to another great friend of mine. I think he might be coming on later, Savante. And it is, I think, I was raised under dictatorship, and I came to the U.S. as an immigrant, as a refugee, with a father and a grandfather that have never really lived under a democracy for a long period of time. They were both born in colonized Somalia. They had a brief moment when Somalia became independent, because it was known as the first democracy of Africa, and that only existed for a couple of years, and so they then spent another 20 some years. Eventually, we came to the United States, and one of the things that they were always so excited about the idea of coming to the United States was that it was a democracy. It was a place that there was a constitution that would protect your rights, and those rights were extended to everyone, that there were civil liberties, that there was going to be a guarantee for our freedom of religion. I remember my grandfather explicitly saying a couple of things to me that have always stayed with me. One was that, you know, America was a place where everyone can become an American eventually, right? Like this is the country that we are, that he was excited to be part of. Okay. And the other one was that it's a representative democracy, and those that, you know, are seeking to represent you should have fluency in your day-to-day struggles. And I think the last thing that has always like stayed with me about the things that he would say to me was just a reminder, right, of that Abraham Lincoln, not Abraham Lincoln, but the founders' idea of like, we are supposed to work towards a more perfect union. And this idea that our institutions can always get stronger, that our society can always become more open, that our freedoms could be more flexible and could be extended to more people, that the protections that are within the Constitution should encompass more people. And I have always believed that we are unique in that way, that there are these documents that are foundational, but they are supposed to be carried forward. And when I think about, you know, Republicans who have for a really long time been touting themselves as the party of freedom, the party of liberty, the pro-Constitution people, you know, experiencing January 6th was a shock, because to be part of a sort of an organized failed coup led by a former Republican president, ginned up by a Republican coalition was a shock to the senses. And then when you think about the banning of books, going after the LGBTQ community, going after women's rights, going after our autonomy, limiting the amount of freedom that an individual here in the United States has, it just doesn't make any sense to anybody who has been paying attention to the way in which that they've been branding themselves. And then, you know, you get to everything that they're doing, from the crazy gerrymandering, from disenfranchisement of so many people from being able to access the ballot box. Those of us who believe in democracy, those of us who want the expansion of our democracy to every corner of this world, have to unite and actually understand the kind of threats that our democracy faces. And if we are going to continue to say that we stand for democracy, that we're willing to defend it around the world, then we have to do everything that we can to defend it here in our country and make sure that it is as strong as it can be. I think, you know, when I talk to foreign ambassadors and foreign heads of office, and they ask and are doing a check-in about how we're feeling about our democracy, I always remind them that the reason we held on January 6th is that we do have strong institutions. There are fringe elements within our society that are powerful, that are well-resourced, that are trying to take away our democracy, trying to weaken these institutions, trying to make sure that we don't have the kind of pride that we carry about who we want to be as a country, these ideals that we're constantly pushing ourselves to live up to. And we have to fight with everything that we got, whether it is showing up and voting, even if you don't want to, whether it is, writing letters to your electeds, whether it is trying to advocate for certain pieces of legislation to pass, whether it's writing op-eds about what are the elements of our democracy that you love, that and ideas of ways we can make it better. We have to constantly be active in engaging some part of it. And I think as citizens of this country, all of us have a responsibility to make sure that we have a stronger democracy that we leave for the next generation.
In other words, if you don't use it, you lose it. Exactly. I feel like it's
and those of us who have parents and come from places where people had it and lost it, really cherish what we have and are working towards making it better.
Final question before we move on is, finding the strength yourself as someone who has been targeted deliberately because of your religion. The amount of, we can't forget that Islamophobia and anti-Muslim rhetoric also really underpins the right-wing movement in this country. And how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you find that strength? And also, what are you looking to outside of, let's say, the Muslim community, what are you looking to the rest of us to do?
I mean, hate and bigotry and divisions have existed long before I arrived in this country, and will remain probably long before I'm gone. But it is our job to look at solidarity not as a noun, but as a verb. It's something that we engage in. So we do have to show up for folks that are part of a marginalized community, especially those that belong to multiple marginalized communities, because we know that they are going to be sidelined. They're like easy pawn for attacks and vilification. And I've really always appreciated the way in which community has always put an armor around me. I feel protected. I feel loved. I feel celebrated. And I'm somebody who obviously has lived through, I always tell people I survived war. I can handle this. So I'm good, but I do worry about some of my colleagues that don't have some of the built up, strength that I have in having to deal with just more than hateful rhetoric, but actual violence. What I will leave you all with is to say, we stay in this struggle and we choose to be as visible as possible and take as many stances as possible to create a better future, because we know that, as parents, as people who also represent other communities that are marginalized, that our presence in itself is freeing for people.
Yes.
Our advocacy in itself is giving permission for people to advocate for themselves. And when they see other people show up for us in that solidarity, it also lets them know that that can exist for them too. So for people not to know that they are alone, we need to be as loud as possible and try to widen the space so that people can live their true lives.
Representative, thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you for, especially now in a time of turmoil and what's happening in the Middle East, and, whether it's anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, or neither, or just, war and militarism.
Suffering, we all pray for them. May God be with them.
Thank you so much for what you do and everything that, everything you do. Hey, be well.
Thank you.
Take very good care, and thank you all for being here too. Hey, you know what? You guys aren't just passive viewers. It's about taking action. So may I remind you, there is a petition you need to sign, because currently, right now, if there was any time I was more happy that there was no functional Congress, it's now, because there are a bunch of lunatics in power. However, the reason that they're lunatics is because a lot of them believe in extremist views, and a lot of them have actually aided and abetted the January 6th insurrectionists themselves and continue to do so. So in accordance with that other time that there was an insurrection inside of this country, and following the resolution of it, we're talking about the Civil War, there's an article of the Constitution that says, nope, you can't hold office. And we want everyone to sign this petition. There have been calls from inside Congress to do the same, to remove these elected officials. We're saying that from the streets, from the people, we also believe that no one who helped or tried to overturn the people's voice and the people's will on January 6, 2021 should be allowed to hold office. So scan that QR code, sign that petition. We've got almost 59,000 signatures so far. That's amazing. I love that. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Nina Turner is up in just a little bit. We're going to talk about the labor struggle and the positive, the hopeful signs that people are coming together in solidarity. But stay tuned. Hang on. One second. Welcome back to the Fight for Our Lives, defending democracy in a post-1/6 world. Again, this event is based on, of all things, a comic book. That's right, a comic book that imagines what would have happened had the January 6 rioters successfully overturned an election, reinstalled their unelected president, Donald Trump. It is a multi-part comic book. The first edition is out at beyond16.com, which is also where you can go to sign that petition. It's awesome. You guys should get it. Give it to people in your lives, all ages. It's truly riveting and it's beautifully done, if not scary. But let's move on because we have waiting in the wings. Ohio State Senator, former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, who's obviously a passionate advocate, for literally everything. Hello, somebody, who launched a new organization called We Are Somebody that is a labor support organization. Welcome, Senator Nina Turner. How are you?
Good, Francesca. Glad to be here with you. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Yeah, so we have seen, whether it's the WGA and SAG going on strike all summer, whether it's Starbucks workers, Trader Joe's workers, Apple workers, people in retail work who are unionizing, to currently Sean Fain and the UAW just flexing that old labor muscle, right, of one of the industries that built this country, the auto industry, just truly taking to the picket lines. And what started as a hot labor summer is a hot labor fall, is going to be a hot labor winter. But tell me about what gives you hope right now, what you are looking to the people who maybe aren't in a particular union, what you're looking to everyone else to do to support this kind of labor action.
Well, as we know, Francesca, most workers in this country are not in unions. Unfortunately, as we are seeing this summer, a solidarity, the numbers are that union membership has dwindled quite a lot in this country over the last 50 years. It is certainly my hope that we can pick up the pace. Now, the beautiful thing about what the labor unions are doing and what their very presence gives hope and a renewed sense of worker solidarity is that the American people, although the majority, again, of Americans are not in unions, but the majority of American people are very much in support of labor unions, which is indeed a beautiful thing, because we know as our labor sisters and brothers and family and friends stand up to fight for better wages, work conditions, and benefits, it certainly helps everybody else. I got a real world example like just happened, I will say a minute, but I'm being facetious when I say it. But Tesla, for example, we know that Tesla workers recently, within the last 2 weeks, they received a raise. And one of the reasons why we can draw a straight line to one of the reasons why they did receive that raise is because our UAW sisters and brothers and family friends are out on the front lines making a demand. So shout out to President Sean Fain and his 145,000 members, because he couldn't do what he's doing or flexing those muscles without their support. And I want to give a special shout out to Streetsboro, Ohio, Local 573. And Francesca, I was just in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, side by side with Local 75. Both of those facilities, both the one in Ohio and in Wisconsin, are parts plants. And though those workers are out there.
Huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've been talking about this right on the news that we've been covering together over at TYT about, the inability, the auto manufacturers to divide these workers right now, and the fact that they're not also, they're unsuccessful in driving the wedge issue between, saving the environment or creating EVs and having good union jobs. Those two things are not opposed to one another. There are no jobs on a dead planet, as we always say. And, this is all, this is the kind of groundwork we need to get to something like a Green New Deal, which, we're talking about ways to, put out the extremist fires. And I feel like a Green New Deal with good union jobs, that would be one of them, right? But any final words about how you see labor playing this role of really shifting a narrative, right, for working people in this country, away from the hate and toward this solidarity?
Yeah, they're very present as we think about members of the House of Labor. When they unite, when they finally decide to go out on strike, I need our viewers to understand this. That's the final straw, because they're giving up salaries, they're giving up their health insurance. Thank God when you have unions like the UAW or the Teamsters, some of the larger labor unions, they have what you call strike funds, which is another reason why We Are Somebody is necessary to be able to galvanize. There's no other organization like it in terms of wanting to raise money. The ultimate goal is to raise money to have a multi-million-dollar, maybe even billions of dollars strike fund to be able to help undergird not just people who are already in the House of Labor, but other workers as well. Makes me think of One Fair Wage. Shout out to Saru, who's fighting across the country to do away, to eradicate the sub minimum wage. That is vitally important too. So all workers. So your question, Francesca, is a very important one. When we look at workers or the House of Labor, when they are out there in solidarity, when we're dealing with justice, especially in the economic lens, those are workers coming together from all vantage points, all political ideologies, just name it. All of those people are not just one political ideology, but they are uniting based on what they have in common. And what they have in common is that they're catching hell from the man or from the woman or from the person, from these corporations that have allowed a type of greed that is absolutely immoral. And I do see a bright light, because for people who have opted out of the political process because they are frustrated, because material conditions really are not changing for Big Mama and Big Papa in hoods all over this country where they are misunderstood, whether those hoods are urban, rural, or suburban, having solidarity as workers brings them back into the fold. And I see that as a very promising position. And let me say this finally, two other points is that we cannot deal with class and not deal with caste. In other words, once we deal with, as a collective working class people, deal with racism, the isms, and particularly anti-Blackness, we get at the heart of worker solidarity, which we know we have to do that in this country. And then, in the immortal words of James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. That solidarity that is happening among workers, I think, gives us an awesome and a magnanimous opportunity to deal with other challenges facing this nation and this world.
Hello, somebody. Thank you so much. Everybody, can we, wearesomebody.org?
.org. Yes, Francesca. Thank you. My team will, I'm sure they're applauding you right now. Thank you for remembering that. We are somebody.
I think it's really nice to know that, we can go to one place and donate one place and say, this is, please spread this around.
Yeah.
You know where to put this. You know who needs this fund, even if folks aren't necessarily in a union yet. But all right. Thank you so much, Senator. Take very good care. I'm getting word we have a, what? Are you serious? Oh, okay. God, this is a little awkward because we're talking about protecting democracy, but I'm just getting word now that we have the former president, Donald Trump, on the line with us. God.
You've been so nasty. Can I just say how nasty you've been? And I just want to say to everybody, this has been fake news. And this is like a poor man CNN. It's like a poor man CNN. So I just want to say so nasty.
Sir, first of all, obviously your wealth is not measured in actual money. I mean, you should know that. You actually, how much is Mar-a-Lago worth these days? What did they downgrade it to? Like 2 mil? A cool 2 mil?
It looks like it's more than whatever motel you're sleeping in right now, but this is like a TED Talk on how to put people to sleep, I have to say. And you're here because of warp speed, right? Nobody gives me credit, do they, Francisco? Nobody gives me credit for warp speed. They said, sir, it'll take 5 years, 10 years. I made it in 2 days. And you all have the great warp speed in me right now.
I just got the new vaccine myself. I took my Walgreens Band-Aid off. Thank you. Are you going to, and I'm assuming you're going to be running with that in ads throughout the country in 2024.
Well, excuse me. Well, I want to talk about gerrymandering. Everybody's saying nasty things about my friend Jerry. And Mr. Mander's a great friend of mine.
Is that a new attorney of yours, sir?
Jerry Mander's my new attorney, and he's going to get me millions and even maybe trillions of dollars from all of this terrible slander. And frankly, I just want to say I'm a fan of trans. You say I hate trans, right? Oh, he doesn't like trans. And I'm a big fan of transitioning into talking about something more interesting. How about we do that?
Let's talk about it. So you will be the first president who will be potentially running for office from prison. And should you lose, are you excited to at least be the president of all the Lucy cigarettes in your cell?
This is good. This should be a Netflix comedy special because Netflix is so sad and woke, so you'd be great. But I'll be running against people like Christie, or I like to call him Chris Krispy Kreme, and he's a nasty person. But Joe Biden is going to be, if he's even alive, because he could be the first president to be assassinated by time. Let's just say that. And I'll be opening a luxury prison. That's what I'll be doing. So I'm fine just running from prison. And,
from jail.
So great.
Well, sir,
shackles will be great. They'll be golden shackles.
You're breaking up. I really wish goodbye. Good luck.
Fake news.
That was, first of all, there's nothing wrong with the hotel that I'm in right now. It's beautiful. Guys, let's keep on that tip because you know that a comic book is part of the reason why we're doing this.
She cut me off.
I'm sorry. Are you still on? Are you still on? Somebody cut his mic. Cut his goddamn mic. Let's go. Look, this comic book has actually been on the road. Let's take a look. It's been on the road in the hands of some very famous people.
Hello, Patriots. We're here at Comic-Con with Alan Jenkins, the creator of 1/6, a comic book that tells the tale of how in my dimension, we actually took over the government on January 6th. Alan, tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay, Q. Can I call you Q?
I am the QAnon shaman. You can also call me Q Baka.
Okay, so from what I understand, in your universe, you succeeded in overthrowing the government.
That is correct.
And so in our universe, we barely escaped that fate. But a lot of the forces that led to that day, the white supremacy, the anti-Semitism, the authoritarianism, are still with us, unfortunately, in this universe. And so Gan Golan, my co-author, and I got together, and we wrote a comic book that asks and answers the question, what if the insurrection had been successful here in our universe? What if our democracy had been overthrown and replaced with an autocracy? And so the book...
I gotta be honest, I don't know what that word means.
Democracy gone. Injustice everywhere.
I'm still not following you.
We did not have our democracy overturned, but it almost happened. And a lot of the forces that were behind it are still with us. And so...
Oh, the shaman. We laugh, but I feel like that dude is free. That actually wasn't the real shaman, of course. That was Jay Ponte, who is a producer of this entire event, who actually has a book out that you guys should all check out. It is called Be the Revolution. It's coming out next week, Friday, October 20th. Be the Revolution, How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. Indeed, they did, and I can't wait for Jay's take on this because he has been on the forefront. He's been everywhere. The guy is a movement ninja, and we're so grateful that he helped put this together. But next, look, guys, let's dig into the vote, man. Let's talk about how radical that still is and how pivotal it is to protecting our democracy. And specifically to that end, let's hear a little bit from the Justice Democrats Executive Director Alex Rojas. Remember, Justice Dems, the group of nerds supposedly who were never going to get anything done, and then supported some of the biggest change makers and progressives that we see here in Congress today. Take a look.
Hey everyone, my name is Alexandra Rojas and I'm the Executive Director of Justice Democrats. I just wanted to send love and solidarity to everyone hopping on from across the country to talk about defending and preserving our democracy from the onslaught of attacks from the GOP and the rising 21st century fascism that they represent. Each of us, from grassroots organizations like JD to elected leaders to volunteers and voters, has a role in this fight, and each of those roles are vital to overcoming what we are all up against. But the role of our federal elected leaders right now is outsized, and our work at Justice Democrats is more crucial now than ever. We are on the front lines of protecting some of our fiercest defenders of democracy, our fiercest defenders of poor and working families in Washington, who are under attack by the same forces that don't want Democrats to take back the House. So if you're interested in protecting the progress that we've built in Congress through the elections of the squad and the new squad of folks like Summer Lee, please join us, sign up to volunteer, and donate at justicedemocrats.com. Again, that's www.justicedemocrats.com. And regardless, please stay in this fight, and are so grateful for everything that you've already done to contribute to it. Take care.
All right, and then joining us to talk about how we protect the right to vote, we are welcoming Svante Myrick, president of People for the American Way, Mondale Robinson of Black Male Voter Project, also mayor of Enfield, North Carolina, Maurice Mitchell, National Director of Working Families Party. Guys, welcome. Look, we have been having a lot of conversations about how to protect our democracy, what our government has done, hasn't done, who's been scapegoated and whatnot. And it definitely feels like there's a missing piece, which is how are communities fighting back? How are they protecting themselves as we head into another presidential election and all the fallout from it and all the potential violence leading up to it? And I know that is the area that the three of you have been focused on in your particular work and in your communities. Mondale, I wanted to talk to you first about that. Tell me about Black Male Voter Project, maybe specifically, and also the work in the hand that you had. I mean, we know that the Republicans still can't get over that Georgia flipped, right? They still are mad. They're still trying to punish everybody for the work that happened in Georgia. But what are you looking to as you look to the next election?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Black Male Voter Project, we spend very little time focused solely on elections because we have massive issues that we need to address as it pertains to what's facing Black men in this country as hurdles, or that's keeping us from participating in electoral processes in a way more than we already do. Nothing more important, not even the racist tactic by Republicans are more important than keeping Black men away from the polls than the horribleness that our side of the aisle presents as candidates, as tactics. And let's be clear, poverty is the leading voting suppressing tool in this country. And Black men, we find ourselves uniquely positioned in this space. So what we're doing right now is trying to combat the transactional way that candidates show up, the auxiliaries show up. And then we're also trying to face or fight 152 years of voter suppression targeted directly at Black men, which means since the passage of the 15th Amendment, we've never actually had the right to vote clean. We've never had to voter suppression. It's a part of voting for us. Yet and still with those markers, with those barriers, we still see Black men showing up. I think what happens though is we get caught up in the status quo, the ideas of what candidates, what parties, and what the donor class believe needs to be done, and we forget the masses. And this is a real situation. If you look at what's going on with Black men right now in this country, 70% of Black men that are registered to vote have not voted or only voted in one of the last 3 federal elections. If you add the off-year elections, then that number goes way higher. 80% of Black men say elected Blacks aren't speaking on their behalf or speak to the issues most important to them. And then almost none of them, less than 20% of Black men believe that they can trust either of the parties in this country. Republicans somewhere around in single digits, and Democrats are around 20%. With these type of numbers coming from your second largest base, there's no way in hell you're going to win necessary states in a way that doesn't allow people like Donald Trump to say that the election was too close not to be stolen. If we are to address the problems that are facing Black men right now in a serious way, we would say get the fuck out of here to a lot of shit. And I'm being honest. Some of that is these white consultants demanding they understand my community more than I do. We will get rid of these Black guys, these Black men, these Black people in general that have tied themselves to the party, and these strategies that have resulted in these horrible failing grades that we see right now from Black men. There's no way Black women should be outperforming Black men in turnout as it pertains to over these 3 election cycles, but it's true, and we see that because that we're putting forth Black men that don't represent the low masses, those who are struggling the most. We have a program that does not look political at all. It looks more like the lived experience of Black men across this country, that brothers that resonate with the 70%. So you won't see Black Male Voter Project doing voter registration. We don't have a voter registration job. It only serves to give the have and haves more notches on their belt. They can say, I paid for this many people to get registered. If we really cared about voter registration, we would be supporting progressive Secretary of States across this country, because then we could just have them have platforms that automatically register everybody over 18, and we won't have to waste resources on voter registration. Also, we don't have a personnel problem or clientele problem as it pertains to Black men. Like I said, nearly 70% aren't participating regularly. That means we're not being heard. The tactics that we're currently using aren't really working as it pertains to Black men. So we've created a program that's based on the lessons from Maslow that tell us how and what we should show up for Black men.
Thank you so much. I think that's really important that it goes beyond the ballot box, and it is it's more than just election cycles, of course. The same way that it's more than just flashy, splashy movements, right? And and activists coming in for the street march, and then the hard work is left to be done. But Svante, I want to kick it to you. Maybe just your reactions, but also your thoughts on specifically protecting voters of color. I mean, look, there was massive expansion of voting rights in 2020, given the pandemic, given the accessibility changed, and that all the window closed, right? And disproportionately falls on people of color, of course, and disenfranchises them, but it's all folks. But how do you see it, and any reactions to Mondale there?
Well, I mean, as always, we should just do what Mondale says, and we'll all be better off for it. I mean, he's spot on as usual. It begins with doing a better job governing. I mean, there's a reason the right wing does not like elections or democracy, is because this is the dirty little secret of American politics. They're not good at it. They're not good at governing. They're better at campaigns, frankly, than governing, which is why they win the campaigns and then get booted out when the economy goes in the crapper, when unnecessary wars are started, when working people suffer, when folks find that their environment is polluted. They kick them out, put reasonable adults back in charge. And then 8 years later, the right wing is out there campaigning, saying, put us back in charge. Well, what's the lesson there for progressives? The lesson is to do a better job governing and a better job campaigning. I served for 14 years in my city of Ithaca, New York, 3 terms as mayor. And Mondale's exactly right. If you knock on somebody's door come election time, and that's the first time they've seen you, I don't care if they're Black, white, men, women, they're not going to be supporting you. And if you haven't been able to solve their problems, you won't win their support. That's the first thing. The second is, we should be honest, that the right wing knows what they're doing. their efforts to disenfranchise they're not just taking shots in the dark. They're not just maybe hoping, guessing that this would work. There's surgical attempts to make it harder to vote, to unwind the pandemic voting protections that were won in 2020, for example, are because the right wing is extremely, extremely motivated. They know what their kryptonite is. They know what our superpower is. That's why when the right wing gets in the office, they do three things right away. First day in office, they attack unions. They make it harder to organize unions. The second day in office, they make it harder for people of color to vote. And the third day in office, they make it harder for women, frankly, to leave the house for any reason whatsoever. If we were smart, then the first thing we would do on our first day in office, strengthen unions. Second day, make it easier for Black and brown people to vote. And third, make it easier for women to live lives of purpose and freedom as promised by the American ideal.
Sadly,
what does that mean? It means pushing for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It means pushing for the Freedom to Vote Act. And it means in this upcoming cycle, outvoting and out organizing. And I will just say before you go to Mo, which is like, honestly, just do whatever Mondale says. If that fails, do whatever Mo says. President and vice president. This idea that a comic book could change the world, if folks don't know, people for the American way, we fight for truth, justice, and the American way. An idea that comes from Superman, who was himself created by two Jewish kids, the kids of Jewish immigrants who came to this country fleeing authoritarianism. And they created this ideal of what a Superman, particularly what a super American would be. And one of his first acts, the Superman, was to fly over to Nazi Germany and kick the shit out, pardon my language, of Hitler, right? So culture can always lead our politics, and telling more powerful, more poignant stories has got to be part of, along with actually governing better, part of how we protect and save our democracy.
Thank you so much, Fonte. Let's kick it over to Maurice. Maurice, I just want to drill down on that, the mobilizing aspect of this, right? Because the right's always mobilize. They don't necessarily. They got a lot of bored Facebook moms and dads, radicalized by misinformation and whatnot. And I think, unlike 2020. We don't have a mass mobilization moment necessarily coming up. I mean, who knows? Could always come up. But I feel like there's a demobilization happening a little bit from progressive wings and from the left, maybe generally. How do you read it? And maybe sort of thoughts on finding the strength to redouble our efforts against this, again, not dead yet, fascist threat?
That's a great question. And I think if we make our focus simply saving democracy, or if we make our focus some politician, Joe Biden, all the way down, then we could expect demobilization, right? But if we do the work that only we could do, the pro-democracy forces that are outside of the official campaigns, to tell a story about how everyday working people are the protagonists of our democracy. And we put the ball in the hands of everyday working people to drive that ball for their agenda. You heard my Senator Nina Turner, talk about the amazing solidarity that's cutting across all different lines around this labor militancy that's taking place, right? That's so exciting. That is the opposite of demobilizing, right? Mm-hmm. When you look around, there's all of these moments and all of these indicators that everyday working people are rising up. Everyday working people are realizing their power, right? And what would it look like if we were the protagonists of the democracy, not an elected official, and it was much deeper than just getting somebody elected, number one. Number two, every election feels like, and we're often told, it's the most important election of our lifetime, right? And the election essentially is basically about the choice between fascism or somehow maintaining whatever the embers of democracy that we have. The challenge around framing it like that is that most people's experience of our democracy isn't great, right? Like when you think about all the things that we've kind of just baked in, the fact that gerrymandering is something that we just baked in, or the fact that many of our people have to wait on long lines, or voter ID laws, or even the structure of the Senate, the idea that DC has no senators, the two Dakotas have 4 senators, on and on and on and on. Many people, understandably, are looking at the quality of our democracy. They're using their eyes and ears and they're saying, what democracy? So when you say, like many nice liberals say to working people, trust me, give me your vote, things will get better. Yeah. Join me to save democracy. I can understand why we're demobilized, especially when people on the populist right are saying, believe your eyes and ears, things have never been worse. Join me so that I can help restore your dignity. Join me so that I could help you protect your family, right? Yeah. It's our job to be better at arguing that working people should be the protagonists of their future than the right wing, right? But if all we're talking about is saving a system that has never worked for working people, then of course we can imagine more demobilization. We need to argue for transforming our economy, transforming our democracy, and making it a true democracy, probably for the first time ever in this country, which means bringing it down to the people and talking more about the politics of the bottom up than the left and right, right? That really, if we're trying to build a pro-democracy united front, a united front to challenge fascism that will mobilize more people than we ever could imagine, then we need to make a pro-democracy message strike at the core of what working people are dealing with every single day. That is our challenge. That is our mandate. And if we do that, we'll break all records. I'm excited about that. We'll break all voter mobilization and turnout records if we're able to truly do that. And that's going to be on us. We can't expect the official party committees and elected officials in the Biden campaign to do that. But the pro-democracy forces that are not connected to those party committees and candidates, we can do that. And so we should take the lead. And we should demonstrate what that looks like if we want our people to not fall into the cynicism, nihilism, and apathy that are a banquet for the far right. Then we need to give folks something to fight for, something to vote for, something to mobilize for. And that has to be us. We need to get our people into the habit of, instead of looking up at billionaires like Elon Musk and others, look towards one another.
Yes.
That will unlock all the organizing we need in order to defeat Trump. And then once we defeat Trump on day 1, day 2 is to transform our democracy through organizing.
Svante was right to listen to you. No, this has been so good. And I think, I just want to underscore that piece, Maurice, because I feel like denying the cynicism and the despair that the right capitalizes on is a losing strategy as well, right? Like the cynicism and despair is there. You can't just be like, no, what are you talking about? Everything's great. Our democracy is great. That's not, it doesn't mean we triple down on the cynicism. It doesn't mean we offer them a darker worldview, but it means we meet people where they're at, which is feeling iced out of the process and the democratic institutions, which is feeling not represented, which is feeling like, as Mondale said, you just get a knock on your door when someone needs your vote. You just get resources when you're running or someone wants something from you. But thank you guys so much. That's been great. That's been and that is a wrap for right now. Maurice Mitchell of Working Families Party. And Svante Myrick of People for the American Way, Mondale Robinson, Black Male Voter Project. Forgive me for the mumbles and jumbles, but everybody check out their work and make sure you are following everything that they're up to. Real quick, reminder about the petition, you guys. Let's go, everybody. So you scan that thing. You say, why the hell are the people who tried to overturn an election still in office? Why are they probably going to shut down the government if they ever decide on who's going to be the leader of their little sort of reality show of, circus rats or whatever. Circus rats? Do circuses have rats? Unclear. But make sure you sign that, guys. The 14th Amendment, hey, it was baked in. Someone was looking out for us in the future, making sure that no, you could not try and overturn an election or coup the United States from the inside and still be elected to office. So there you go. With that, we have one more piece of this fight whether, of course, it's labor, whether it's voting rights and community organizing, or defending immigrant rights, defending trans folks, and that is defending our existence, the climate. And because we've got ugly things like this guy.
And I think I know more about the environment than most people. Gonna have clean coal, really clean coal. I don't think science knows, actually. A windmill will kill many bald eagles. So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry. My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. Gonna have clean coal, really clean coal. New Green Deal, or whatever the hell they call it. Green New Deal.
Greta Thunberg,
Oh, that's right.
who you had said needs to work on her anger. She had some very harsh words.
How old is she?
She's 17 now.
Oh,
Yes.
that's good.
But what is your response to her?
She beat me out on Time Magazine.
But did you hear from?
Beautiful moment, always. Yeah, before we get into our discussion on climate, which will be our last discussion, just a reminder, you can sign that petition by scanning the QR code, but also go to beyond6.com, which is where you can sign it and also get a copy of the graphic novel that, again, is the backdrop to this entire discussion. What if 1/6 had been successful? It is gripping, it's beautiful, it's a good gift, and just also thank you to everyone that has helped this broadcast. ACT.tv, Move On, 1/6 Comics, Western States Center, People for the American Way, Political Research Associates, and Black Male Voter Project. Thank you guys so much. And now I really want to bring in, and I believe we have him. Do we have RL, or is Bill coming in on the pinch? Oh, okay. Sorry. Gan Galan, who is also the co-author of the 1/6 graphic novel. Gan, welcome back. How you doing?
Great to be here. It's been an amazing show. Thank you.
Yeah, I agreed. Look, I think there is nothing also, that brings us together more, like the fight for our lives, like the fight to stop climate change and actually hold our leaders accountable. And it's speaking of the powerful versus the people, the 99% versus the 1%. This is it. This is that fight. And as young people take the reins here, this is their number one issue. But I wanted to talk to you because you are also the co-founder of the Climate Clock. How do you tell us about the Climate Clock, and how can it sort of like recalibrate us to focus on what really matters at this time?
Yeah, thank you for that. And, I think as so many speakers have shown have talked about today, is that our crisis in democracy is linked to all the other crises that we're facing. And the climate crisis certainly, is a major existential crisis. It's connected to racial and economic justice in fundamental ways. Those who are the least responsible for the climate crisis are experiencing the worst impacts. And those who are causing some of the worst impacts are not making the changes that we need to make in the time that we have. And this is where democracy becomes so crucial, because we are going to need to push our leaders to make sure that we are doing what the climate crisis is demanding that we do, which is to act in time. And there are climate deniers running for office. There's a political party that has made climate denialism a key pillar of its agenda. And at the same time, even those who acknowledge the reality of climate change are not doing nearly enough. And so we need the political space that democracy provides, the tools that democracy provides, to put the pressure on these leaders to make a rapid transition away from fossil fuels towards a just, renewable future. And that's why democracy is so critical to this fight. And we've talked about the role of art and artists and creativity. And I just wanted to introduce one more tool, one more weapon that we can use in this. This is called a climate clock, for those of you who may not have encountered this before. Let me see if I can get this in the whole frame. But basically, it is a portable instrument, a portable scientific instrument. Here we go. That shows what might be the most important number in the world, which is the time remaining. At the top, you can see it says 5 years, 284 days. The time remaining before we've emitted enough carbon into the atmosphere through oil, gas, and coal. We're going to push ourselves past the 1.5 degree global temperature rise, which, to say it plainly, is a critical point of no return in this climate crisis, where many of the worst impacts that we're already seeing, climate changes here, will become irreversible. And this is not an end of the world clock. It is a save the world clock that is showing what our window of hope is. And that time is just such an important part of everything we need to do to fight for climate justice. We lost 4 years during the last Trump administration that we could not afford. And we absolutely cannot. You can see the number is 500 and 284 days. That is a shockingly small amount of time that we have to make sure we don't go past this critical threshold. We can't spend that time with another climate denying administration. It would be not just devastating for this country, but for the entire planet. And so we have to make rapid, bold progress to meet our climate commitments and to fight for climate justice. And the clock is one tool that's going to help us do that, but it doesn't work if it's not in the hands of everyday people, climate justice activists around the world who are pushing to push our leaders from outside the system. So we need to win in the ballot, in the voting booth, but we also need to make sure we have the political space to keep pressuring those leaders, or we will lose this crucial climate fight. So the climate clock is another tool that's available to anyone who wants to bring it to their community to pressure their political leaders. Go to climateclock.world. But this is a fight that touches every part of our fight for justice, and to protect all of our communities. And it's
kind of the antidote to speaking of authoritarianism and autocrats around the world. It's something else that brings us together in solidarity with people around the world. So hey, but thank you so much, Gun, and Climate Clock. Whew, my heart is racing, and we have to get to work. I want to bring in to the discussion President of Climate Hawks Vote, speaking of the importance to vote to take action on the climate with your vote. R.L. Miller, R.L., thank you so much for being here. Just jump off with the fact that you were recently in New Mexico for a climate action where an extremist pulled a gun on the action and actually did shoot and injure someone. Tell us about that and tell us what happened.
Sure. And let me first off say thank you very much to everybody who's been watching at home. This has been a long program, but it's been really inspiring. I love the way that you've brought together so many different aspects of our movement, because we are all in one movement. A couple of weeks ago, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico for a climate conference. We went on a decolonization walk, looking at statues of conquistadors and Americans statues had been torn down by indigenous folk during the George Floyd protests. And a few of us decided to travel up to Espanola, New Mexico, where indigenous people were rallying against a statue of a conquistador that was supposed to be on a city council for discussion for getting replaced. Indigenous folks weren't happy about this. This was a particularly odious conquistador who massacred an entire village and cut off the right foot of every surviving able-bodied male. So I traveled up there and I watched a hate crime play out in real time for 2 hours. There was one Trumper in a MAGA hat said "Make America Great Again," who was there to harass, troll, and disrupt us. The indigenous folk had created a little impromptu altar. He picked up objects on it. They asked him not to. He kept on trying to do it. During the rally, which was very peaceful and very prayerful, he and some of the other Trumpers who showed up tried to talk over the speakers, they harassed the speakers, they trolled. At the very end, the Indigenous started getting a little nervous and asked that all of the children be gathered in one spot. The Trumper started to head toward the children. My friend Jacob was one of the people who tried to stop him. Trumper leaped over a low stone wall, pulled out a gun, and shot Jacob in the chest. He then tried to point his gun at a 23-year-old Indigenous woman. His gun jammed, and he drove off and ultimately was captured about 10 miles down the road. Apparently, there were a lot of other guns and ammunition in his car, and it is our belief that he showed up at this rally intending to kill the Indigenous women and children. So when we talk about protecting our democracy, this is what we are protecting our democracy from. People who used to be all right just showing up online in the comments, but Trump has encouraged, and the January 6th insurrection have given them the sense that they can now show up in real life with real guns, real bullets, and shoot real people. My friend Jacob was airlifted to Albuquerque. He is in the hospital in critical condition. He took a bullet to his chest. They've removed his spleen. He's undergone several major surgeries since then. Look on GoFundMe for Jacob Johns, and you will quickly find a GoFundMe that has been established for a brave warrior with no health insurance.
We're going to put that in the chat, RL. I just thank you for relaying that. And that is so intense. And just, can you just leave us with, I think for a lot of people, it scares them, how extreme, everything's gotten, and what would have once been a perfectly peaceful, normal gathering is now being targeted for the crime of gathering Indigenous people who believe in, keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and, I'd like as if that was any kind of, as if that was a crime. And so just offer us some, how what does it leave you with? Because they can't break us, right? You've been in the struggle for so long, and ironically, you're fighting for them too. We're all going to be impacted by climate change.
And let me just say that democracy is a muscle that must be exercised a lot more often than once every 2 years. And the solution is to not be terrified. Following week, I went to a UAW rally. There were no shots fired, and in that respect, it was very healing. And so we simply marched around sticking up for auto workers, and it was awesome and beautiful. And let me just say, to change everything, we need everybody. And everybody has some passion and some skill set. If you're worried about school boards and book bans, show up at the school board meeting, show up at your library board meeting, show up. Sign up, let me just get a plug in here to sign up for Climate Hawks Vote. We ask people to stand up for climate. We try to build political power for the climate movement. And that also means standing up for voting rights, because the right to vote in this country is under attack. Research your local candidates and ask them to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money pledge. That's nofossilfuelmoney.org. And simply show up at the candidate debate and let them know that people are watching.
Yeah.
There's room for everybody in this movement, whether you're the kind of person who wants to march outside with a bullhorn, or whether you're the person who wants to set up cake and cookies for the people marching when they're done marching, or whether you want to stay up at 2 a.m. looking at spreadsheets, or whether you want to sit around inside the conference room, in the room where it happens. Don't be afraid to go a little bit outside your comfort zone too, because we have solutions. And the solution, most of all, starts with signing a petition and showing up. Thanks.
RL, you're wonderful. And I just want to say I've been a huge fan, and I am so grateful for your work and your leadership. So thank you so much. And please, and sending so much love and healing to Jacob, and And we will put that link in the description. But let's go to another leader in our climate movement here. Again, this pivotal piece of how we build a better future, how we create a different narrative that is a pro-democratic narrative that includes the rights of all of us, including the rights of the earth. Here is Bill McKibben.
Hello, there it's Bill McKibben here from Third Act. Us old timers, people over the age of 60, working on the twin issues of climate and democracy, with tens of thousands of volunteers in every corner of the country. And we work on these two things because we think they are deeply linked, that they're linked to our remarkable levels of income inequality and racial inequality in this country, and because, above all, we understand them to be timed tests that have to be dealt with right now. Sometimes it feels to me like all the work is coming down to the next year or two. This past summer, we saw the hottest temperatures ever recorded in human history. And by human history, I mean at least the last 125,000 years. Those temperatures are just getting higher and higher as the year goes on because this El Nino is kicking in on top of the global warming that we've produced. We're seeing weather that no human being has ever witnessed before, and it's tragic and hard. And at exactly the same moment, we're seeing the most relentless threat to our democratic traditions here in this country that we've ever witnessed. Somehow, a person who tried to stage a coup to stay in power is returning to the public stage with a possible chance of returning to high office. It's almost mind-boggling for those of us of a certain age who remember a slightly more senior time in our society, but we have to stop it now. And truthfully, an awful lot of the key to this fight rests in the fact that they're intertwined. We don't have much time to do it, which means we have to work with unity, with power, with great determination, but also with great love and affection. Because it really is a gorgeous world that we inhabit even at this late date. And it really is a precious thing to still be able to exercise some influence in this democracy. We have to figure out how to keep as much of those things intact as we can so that the next generation of people will be able to make them flourish again. This has to be done now. There is no rest for the weary. So onward, with enormous thanks to everybody who's a part of this big, broad movement.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill McKibben, for those words. Woo, no rest for the weary. And this has been quite a jam-packed couple of hours. And I am exhausted. I'm enthused. I'm excited. And I'm happy to bring back, again, the co-authors of 1/6, the graphic novel about what could have happened on January 6th had the insurrection succeeded. Again, there's multiple editions and episodes coming out beyond 16.com. Did I get that right, you guys? I'm so fried. Gan Golan and Alan Jenkins. Guys, take us home here.
Thanks so much, Francesca. And it's beyond 16.com. But you just did an absolutely fantastic job weaving it all together. And I guess, those are some of the takeaways for me from our time together, that these issues are all connected, that saving our democracy, ensuring equal dignity for everyone and equal justice and accountability, protecting our planet, these are all of a piece. We've got to move forward together, and we're all connected. And so it's fantastic to hear those themes echoed, and also to have heard so many things that we can do, that each of us can do to move forward together. Among those are signing the petition and to disqualify insurrectionists, and buying our comic book, we hope, and downloading the Western States Center Action Guide. But there are many, many other things that we can do. Gon, I'll turn to you to add your thoughts.
Always hard to say things better than Alan, but I really love this conversation, and I think the big takeaway for me is that yes, all the crises that we face are linked to the crisis in democracy, but we cannot protect democracy unless it is linked to improving the lives of the lived realities of people, be that working class families or the many communities that are being impacted and targeted by this rising authoritarianism. And that we have to be doing the work to organize as part of those communities, with those communities, as allies to those communities. And we have to be willing to think beyond voting and being willing to get out into the streets. So yes, buy the comic book, sign the petition, but also see you out in the streets and doing all the important work that's ahead of us to protect democracy and protect the many, many communities that we are a part of.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Professor Alan Jenkins and Gon Golan. Again, everybody get this comic. And I just want to thank everybody. That does it for our broadcast. Thank you to everyone who made this possible. Again, act.tv, of course, 16 Comics, Western States Center, People for the American Way, Black Male Voter Project, Move On, Political Research Associates. Thanks to all the guests who waited in the wings to speak. Thank you to the representative Ilhan Omar and Ted Lieu, and then Attorney General Keith Ellison. I think what I've taken away from this is that we need new narratives. We have the narratives. We have the people on our side. We have the numbers. It's about it's about just doing it. I just heard someone scold their dog, so I thought that was really adorable because we're all at home with our pets. But I will see you guys on the streets. Thank you so much, everyone, for lending your voice to this. And I hope you share this stream with others. And I hope you share this petition with others and find your niche about how you can plug in to all of the incredible organizations that were featured here. Thanks, y'all. I'm Francesca Fiorentini. Follow me at Franny Fio. Holler at my podcast, The Bituation Room. See me live. If you're in San Francisco, I'll be at the Punchline on Tuesday, October 17th. If you live in SF, you live in the Bay, come see me. And we'll fight insurrectionists together. If you're an insurrectionist, don't come. Thanks.